All right, looks like we're ready to go. Thanks for attending, everyone. I think this is our 5th Lightning Design Review session, and kind of slow rolling it, giving anyone that's straggling a chance to get in here. I'm Lincoln Anderson. I'm with 352 Media Group, and we're going to just look at 3 apps today, and we're going to talk about the Windows Phone design language and just general design tips, how we can maybe tweak some of the apps or think about different ways of designing them to improve usability and whatnot. So let's get started. The first app we're going to talk about was actually mentioned last week a little bit. It's a city guide app. Just as kind of a refresher. It's an app where you can get recommendations and search for a variety of things in your area. This designer is starting with a prototype in SketchFlow, which is really great for wireframing and just testing out navigational patterns and architecting your app before you actually build it. So we really just looked at the main page last week and just talked about making the best use of the screen space by having a more tailored layout. But what I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail was some of the interior pages. This is the screen you would see if you tapped on Entertainment, and it would bring up a list of recommended venues, movies, movie theaters and whatnot that are in your area and have a high rating. So the first glance would give you, I imagine it would either order by proximity to your location or just by what had the highest rating. Maybe that's something the user can select how they want to sort. Down at the bottom you can see that there's a custom search button, and so functionality like searching or sorting and ordering your data, those would be good items to include in an app bar. Just circle buttons that are popped up on the bottom of the screen there. That might be something that this designer had in mind, but what it looks like right now is just that's a normal button that's on the screen. But anything that's a command like that is putting it in the app bar is a great place for it. The other just simple thing about this screen is I would just include a title of what the category is that you're looking at, entertainment, for example, just so you have a feeling of where you are in the application. So just a comment about the app bar, including the custom search circle button and other commands, comes into play with screens like this. This is what the designer has if you were to tap on restaurants, and it sort of puts a decision in front of the user. Do you want recommendations, which is what Delight Me would say, or do you want to search for something very specifically? And this is, if you think about it, this isn't a very informative screen. It's almost a barrier. It's telling the user, before you get into any rich information, you first have to make a choice. So this screen could be replaced with, right off the bat, some recommendations, and it can be whatever kind of layout you want. It could be a straight up list, or it could be something more tailored that was featuring certain restaurants, but the search would be an item that would be in the app bar. And I think if you only have one circle button in the app bar and it's just a central item, it's really going to stand out. I think sometimes designers are afraid that controls are going to be lost, like options are going to be lost down there, and you're not really featuring them. I think most of the time that's not really something to be concerned about. If you really want to talk about your search and why it's so robust, then I think you can do that in a layout like this. But if it's just a button, like right now, it's just a choice that the user has to make. I would say streamline that. So just want to take a minute and give you a link to the Windows Phone Bootcamp. So this is a video series that's on Channel 9, and I'll give you a chance to get the URL. You can also just search for for Windows Phone Boot Camp in Bing, and I think it's like the 5th search result if you do that. But I did want to kind of showcase it a little bit. It's the setup of it is pretty nice. It's in, if you're kind of new to all this stuff, it's in an order where you can just watch the videos top down, and they're in short segments. Some of them are longer, some of them are 40 minutes or so, but most of them around 15 minutes. But they're also split up, so if there's something specific that you want to dive into, for example, down here, the video on controls, you can kind of zoom in to those types of things. But they're very, the documentation on MSDN for Windows Phone Design Language is very rich, and it's just it's a lot, especially if you're kind of still acclimating to it. It's great documentation, but it's not maybe not such a great intro. And these boot camps are a great way to familiarize yourself or refamiliarize yourself with certain concepts. They start out very basic, talking about design philosophy, delve into more technical stuff. So just wanted to share that. Let's see. So what we're going to look at is called Lomogram, and this is a app where you can take pictures from your library or snap photos from your camera and then apply different effects to them, and you have a lot of options as far as social networks that you want to share them with. So you can basically with one share action, share to Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It's very similar to Instagram. It doesn't actually use the Instagram APIs or anything like that, I don't think. It's its own entity, but it's got a very similar feel. This app is really sharp, and a lot that's going on that is following the Windows Phone Design language really well. I'm going to show a screen that I thought was particularly nice, the screen where you can crop your photo in a second. But first I wanted to zoom in on this welcome page. So this is the first screen that the user would see. And I just want to kind of point out some things and then make a couple recommendations for it. Up at the top, there's the title of the app, Lomogram, and then down in the middle, there's another logo. I don't know if that is a tile that does anything, if you were to tap on the big Lomogram logo, or if that's just another branding. So the duplication of that is a little bit weird to me. If you want to make a fancier title on the top, I think that's fair, but it almost looks like a tile that would do something. I'm just not sure what it would do as a user. The other, I guess the navigation, I think, is a little strange. I've seen developers do this too before, where you have a pivot and you have things like settings, and another item in this pivot is about. And those are they're kind of utility items that I think of those as you want them there when you need them, but otherwise you don't want to be distracted by them. You don't really want to see them. And oftentimes an app bar is a good place to do that. You can do, if you want to include it as a circle button, if settings are really important in your application, you can do the little gear icon down in the app bar. If they're not so important, or you don't want them to be really visible all the time, this is a great app for that scenario, because when you're editing a photo, you've got options in the app bar like, maybe undoing an action or approving a cropping action or something that you'll see in a second. So you may not want to clutter up that bar, but you can include something like settings or about. The about page, I don't know how often users actually go to that. So putting it as an extended option in the app bar when you actually expand it as a text option is a good way of handling that. So I don't know that the pivot's really necessary if we really just want to provide users a really fast way to get into the application. Looking even further down at photo library and camera, I wonder then if we're just looking at the summation of this whole page and we're looking for really how can we make this simpler and let users get into the action really quickly. It might be nice to jump into the photo library right away and have the camera as just an action that you can optionally do to just add something to the photo library. So dive in so you can have a visual more of what I'm talking about archetypally. So this is kind of the current app flow. There's a pivot where you have welcome, settings, and about, and we're treating them all kind of like they're of equal importance. Then I'm addressing that by saying, well, the screen where you actually dive in and actually play with photos and take advantage of all those great features, that's really the important thing. Settings and about really don't deserve to be on the same level, I don't think. And then, as I understand it, the flow is that you would branch to either photo library or camera to get a photo source to use, and then you would move into the edit screen where you can apply an effect or crop it or whatnot. So flow is a little bit strange. There's a lot of pages that we're focused on here. So, to the developer, I would just say, consider a flow that's more like this. You launch the app, you immediately see a photo library. It's kind of like get started, pick a photo, and then on the bottom there's an app bar to snap a photo with a camera if you actually want to do something new. And then you can, whichever route you choose, you are dumped straight into the edit screen. And then the app-wide items like settings and about, those would be put in the app bar as just when you expand it, extended options down there. So I think there's a lot of really cool features in this app, and it's really slick once you get into the actual selecting of effects and stuff like that. I think getting users in there quicker would benefit a lot. I wanted to talk about this screen. This is the screen where you have a photo and you crop it to a particular dimension. You can choose along the bottom from preset dimensions, and I guess pressing lock would lock your screen, your crop mark aspect ratio in as you're resizing. Otherwise, you could just manually resize it to be however tall and however wide you wanted. So there's actually a lot going on the screen. You've got an undo and a redo, or maybe that's a rotation of the photo down on the bottom. And you've got an approve, and you've got a cancel, and you've got this list of options. You can see which one's selected. There's a lot of ways in which the developer or the designer could have gone wrong here. So, for example, they could have added a lot of labeling and instructions, like above the aspect ratio. You know, this is your aspect ratio, width, height. But instead, they just made it really simple. They just used numbers, and more importantly, gave examples of a little icon of each one of the aspect ratios, so you can just understand it by just glancing at it and flicking through all the different options. The crop marks as well. You know, cropping can be presented in a lot of different ways. You could have a dotted line marquee. You could have little handles that look like they're 3D popping out, something that you grab, little arrows and whatnot. But this developer really took the language of Windows Phone, saying, let's remove all that noise, let's remove all that clutter and that chrome, and just make it really simple, and just focus on clean lines and separations and just distinctions in color, the little blue squares to represent touch points, and not making it any more complicated than that. And I think it's really simple, even though it's something that I don't think anyone has made this exact type of interface before. I think they went about it in a really slick way. The third app we'll look at is called Weather Cards, and this app is it's basic, and it's a weather app. You can keep track of several locations, and it gives you at a view what the weather is like. And just as I understand it, the way right now is just the status, whether it's raining or snowing, just high level. And then you can expand. You could slide down these cards or tap on one of them to slide it down and then see more details, precipitation and all that sort of thing. So the thing that I think separates this app from other weather apps is that it's just presented in almost in like a flashcard sort of format. It's just something that feels like you're flipping through a stack of physical, almost like playing cards or something like that. Of course, that's not a typical design pattern on the Windows Phone, so I don't want to tell a developer not to do that. I just want to point out that there are some artifacts in the design that look a little bit strange because we're introducing things like rounded corners. Like if you look at the line or the separation between Budapest and London, where the rounded corners are, you can see a little bit of the white background of the card contents just kind of poking out there. And I think that sometimes those little gaps add up to an interface not really looking as sharp and clean as it could. I think there's also some other weird things going on with the margins, like the very top of the Budapest card doesn't look quite rounded. It almost looks like it's being cut off. there might be like a negative margin there or something. So, I mean, I would just, if you're going to stick with this look, I would go for consistency and removing any bit of those little kind of visual glitches, those little gaps that are going to just make it not look as sharp as it could. So a couple of other things about this screen. I don't know if the colors represent something, if they're just colors that the user chose, or maybe they're just randomly assigned, or if they actually represent the sort of mood of the weather condition or the time of day for that particular card. If it's the latter, if it actually represents a unique condition, I would be concerned about what this layout looks like when multiple locations that have the same background color are right next to each other. You would lose that separation. A lot of things on Windows Phone have an actual gap, like tiles. They have a little bit of a gap in between them to create that separation. Here we're relying purely on color contrast, so you just would need to make sure that that separation is always there once you start populating this with actual live data. Another thing to think about is if you look at the top two locations here and the bottom two locations, Tokyo, Istanbul, Budapest, London, there's bright colors that are, I don't know if those are pulled from the accent colors available on the phone, but close enough. The white text contrasts on them really nicely. Looking at New York, it almost looks disabled because it's just shades of gray. If you just kind of play one of these things is not like the other type of game, New York stands out, and it seems like something's wrong with it. I mean, one is just that the contrast of the text is not quite where it should be. It's inverted, it's gray. There's a lot contributing to it making it look disabled. And maybe it is disabled. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how it works, but I would say whenever you introduce colors in as a background like this, make sure that just like the accent colors on the phone, they contrast really well with white and they contrast really well with black. So whatever you choose to do with legibility and layout is going to look sharp. I would recommend that the titles of these locations be not all in all caps. And one of the reasons for that is just generally words are easier to read when you have uppercase and lowercase, just because the shapes are more distinct and you can easily scan them. For example, New York, if that was uppercase N, uppercase Y, and the rest of it was lowercase, the N and the Y would really jump out to you. If you're a New Yorker, you're accustomed to seeing a capital N and a capital Y, and your eye would pick it up quicker. Right now, all the letters are the same height, and they just all have very similar shapes, so nothing really jumps out. I was going to also suggest new card on the bottom. That's presumably you would tap that, and that would initiate a screen where you can choose a location, or maybe there's a sort of a search, like an auto-populated box type of experience. I would recommend that you either make an app bar item, like a little plus icon on the bottom, or if you want to stay with this theme of having cards, that you at least add a circle button or something that makes that new card label feel more like a command. I just feel like there's not enough quite right now that's distinguishing it as a command that adds something new rather than just a label for another card. So I think that's it for this screen. If you were to tap on Budapest, it would expand into a full card. And so that's what this screen's looking like. And I think this is pretty nice. I had I had one more comment about the previous screen, and that was, I don't know if the time zone, 7 p.m., 6 p.m., 1 p.m., I don't know if that's as important as the temperature in that area. So I would consider putting the temperature there instead of the time. The time is something that's never, it's never going to change, really. So back to the screen. This screen's pretty clean, good use of iconography, the big important numbers, temperature, time, precipitation, you can kind of scan all those at a glance. I would recommend I think the 22%, that's precipitation or chance of rain, I would recommend using an icon there, like a little droplet icon. just something that makes that a little clearer instead of having to put out a whole, include a whole labeling of what it means, just an icon. And then down in the bottom, I would say that there's the layout of it is good. I would just say that the horizontal lines between the items are making it look a little busier than I think it needs to. And I would even suggest, like, if you're worried about just there being a visual separation, I would use white space. I would use negative space. And if that means that you need to shrink down the size of the icons and the labeling a little bit just to add a little bit more breathing room in between each one of those days in the forecast, then I would give that a shot. I think it'll make your whole layout, which it breathes pretty well, I think it would make that also apply to the forecast down below. So that's it for today. We only had 2 new submissions. Next session is going to be in a week, January 24th on Thursday. If you submit your app before Tuesday, I'll get it in. You can find the video recording of this session and others on the registration